Today, the French town of Dieppe is a peaceful seaside holiday resort. But back in 1942, it was under Nazi occupation and heavily defended by German soldiers. So why did the Allies choose Dieppe as the target of an elaborate secret attack? And what events caused this mission's failure and the loss of countless lives? Join me to discover the truth about one of the worst disasters of World War II, the Dieppe Raid. After being driven out of France by the Germans, there was growing pressure on the British for a counter-attack. But with US troops still not ready, a full-scale assault was out of the question. So Churchill approved a one-day raid, land at Dieppe, gather intel, destroy defences, and withdraw fast. So of all the towns on the French coast, why Dieppe? And the main strategic advantage that Dieppe had is over here with its port. Both the Allies and the Germans understood the importance of a port, especially when you're considering an attack on occupied territory. Across the road, it's for that reason that Dieppe was so heavily defended. These streets that we are passing through right now would have been defended with barbed wire, machine gun posts. The British who were planning this invasion knew how impregnable Dieppe was, especially its port, which is why they planned their invasion on the beaches in Dieppe and on the beaches all along the coast around Dieppe as a way of landing troops with more chance of success. We're now walking along the harbour wall into the English Channel that separates England and France. And it was on a beautiful day like this, on the 19th of August 1942, that 237 ships set sail from British ports like Portsmouth and Newhaven, and early in the morning headed across to Dieppe. The soldiers who would have been crossing the channel at night time were made up of mostly Canadian and British troops. They were given rum and for what many of them was their final breakfast. They were setting off for destinations all along the coast here, to the east over here, and to the west, which is where we're gonna head right now to look for signs of one of the few successes of the Dieppe Raid. The French seem to love their fishing. Heading out of Dieppe here, and there are a lot of hills, which was a strategic advantage for the Germans, who had basically mounted gun batteries and other defences all along the coast so that they could attack approaching boats and soldiers who happened to land on any of the beaches along here. So let's head out of Dieppe to a town called Pourville, where a team of elite British commandos was planning a very important mission. If I don't die before I get there. This is the beach where over 200 commandos landed with a very specific mission. And right behind me here is a huge collapsed bunker, but no doubt it would have been firing on these commandos as their landing craft arrived on the beach. Up on the headland behind me here was a gun battery that had a range that could take out ships out in the channel there. And these commandos had a specific mission to go and take that out. Let's go and check it out. All the gun batteries dotted along the coast here were named after Nazi leaders like Goering, Goebbels, Hitler. And the one we're gonna visit just up here, Hess. The commandos approached the Hess battery right here. They killed all the Germans inside, and then they used plastic explosives to destroy the guns, which were described as opening up like peeling a banana. And now this is all that remains. This is the German gun battery destroyed on the 19th of August 1942 by the 4th British Commando, led by Lieutenant Colonel Lovett, during the Operation Jubilee. Operation Jubilee is the code name for this Dieppe raid. that's where the Germans would have been stationed, underground and protected from attack above by this huge block of concrete. The British commandos' destruction of the Hess bunker was one of the few objectives that were successfully achieved in the Dieppe Raid. But there were also thousands of Canadians involved in this operation. Unfortunately, many of them didn't come back. But to get a sense of some of the small successes they did have, let's first visit the site up along the coast here. This beach behind me is Green Beach in the town of Pourville, where the Canadians landed to the sound of bagpipes and heavy fire. Problem was, some of them were landed on the wrong side of the river, the one that's passing right underneath me here, and their target was a gun battery up there on the cliff. This meant that they were unexpectedly forced to cross this river here along this bridge. Today, walking across the bridge, it seems like just a small stretch of water, but in 1942 this was heavily defended. But it was thanks to one Colonel Cecil Merritt. He basically took them across. It was recorded at least 4 times, and he was seen as one of the heroes of this raid. I spotted this bunker which looks like it's fallen from the cliff just up here. Wow. So I guess that was the door to the bunker. It's crazy to think this thing has lasted for over 80 years. And I guess it's probably going to be here in one way or another for another 80. Well, despite crossing the river, Captain Merritt and his troops weren't able to make it all the way up the hill there to the gun battery, and were eventually forced to turn back. And it was the failure to destroy defences like these that would lead to the disastrous consequences of this raid, which is what we're going to look into next. So we're passing through Dieppe on our way to the next beach. The Road of the Canadians, I think, gives a clue to the gruesome reality that we're going to find. Well, this here is the Blue Beach in the town of Puys, where 554 Canadian soldiers landed. But not only did they face machine gun fire, there was barbed wire all across the beach and a high sea wall that prevented progress. Before long, the beach here was strewn with bodies, and those who did make it to this wall didn't have much option than to just stay as close to it as possible to try to keep away from the bullets. Within a few hours of landing, the fighting had finished, and of the 554 Canadians that originally landed, only 54 returned that day. On this beach, officers and men of the Royal Regiment of Canada died at dawn, 19th of August 1942. Not only was what happened on this beach a disaster because of the loss of life, but also it was a tactical failure because the guns up on the cliffs up here remained intact, protecting the beaches of Dieppe, where many more soldiers were about to land. And that's where we're going to visit next to see how this raid really was one disaster after the other. This is the main beach of Dieppe, where more Canadian and British soldiers landed with the aim of basically taking the port, holding it for some time, and then making an exit via the same route across the English Channel. Although they brought with them 27 tanks, those easily got stuck on the large pebbles on this beach, and the troops faced barbed wire fences and constant gunfire. Although some of the tanks made it across this sea wall here, it was impossible to proceed any further into the actual town. The dire situation is best described by one of the German commanders who was overlooking this scene. The beach was strewn with infantry equipment, machine guns, packs, grenade throwers, munitions. The Canadians were clinging tightly against the concrete wall, seeking protection. On the broad lawn that ran the length of the promenade, tanks were twisting and turning, trying to get through into the town. The only reminders on this beach of that day in 1942 are a few commemorative plaques like the one behind me. But the question I have is, what lessons could be learned from all this seemingly unnecessary bloodshed? Well, to answer that question, let's head back through the town and up onto the hill to our final destination. Well, this is where the Canadians that didn't make it home, the ones that weren't captured and the ones that weren't wounded, this is where they ended up, in this Canadian cemetery on the hills above Dieppe. Some of these, like this one here, don't even have a name. Private H.E. Rowell, W.S. MacDonald, and another unnamed soldier. 1,197 Allied soldiers, mostly Canadians, lost their lives. Question is, what went so wrong? And was it all worth it? One of the things that I heard as a justification, the Battle of Normandy was won on the beaches of Dieppe. The things they learnt from the failure of the Dieppe Raid, the fact that securing a port wasn't actually that important. It was much easier to land on sand rather than pebbles, and far better reconnaissance was needed to know what the defences were like in reality. Maybe if you look at it that way, you can say that what happened in Dieppe was a necessary evil for the liberation of Europe. Let me know what you think. But what I am thankful for are the small reminders of what happened in 1942 dotted along the coast, so that we can remember what happened. I hope you enjoyed discovering the Dieppe Raid with me, and I'll see you in the next one.